Well, this evening I wanted to talk a bit about care and a bit about sunsets. So I thought we'd start with Felix Stow container port. Last week's talk was about beauty as care, how our practice might become beautiful, might express beauty and thereby express care. And we had, in our sharing, lots of interesting comments, which tended to be more something that struck me as really beautiful, usually unexpectedly. I go, yeah, absolutely, how wonderful, what a gift. Thank you, world. But equally, my first thought was, yeah, okay, but I've been talking about care as action. And this is just recognising beauty, the perceiving of beauty. Okay, so that's a difference of emphasis. And then I realised I was wrong completely. Because actually, perception, awareness, is the very beginning of care. So let's think about that a little. So, Felix Stow container port. I think Claire was saying largest container port in the country. So, ships, big container ships coming and going. Massive cranes loading and unloading, lorries driving in and driving out, all hours of the day and night, massive lorry park, stacks of containers. But this was seen unexpectedly at night from a distance. So all of that kind of is there and present, but disappears into this wonderful light show over water. And of course all the kind of mirroring which one gets. How wonderful, how beautiful, what a gift. And of course, beauty, if we think about perceiving beauty, since forever there have been theories as to why this experience or that experience should be beautiful. Sometimes psychological, sometimes formal. All coming from somewhat different directions, trying to isolate, well, what makes the beautiful beautiful, so on. I love the abstract expressionist painter Barnett Newman's dictum that basically aesthetics is to the artist, and for that matter to the viewer, as ornithology is for the birds, you know. Really interesting, but nothing to do with us. So how do we tend to think about these encounters in terms of Zen normally? Well, it tends to be, just be the moment. And this is where I get to the sunset, because, you know, it's kind of Zen cliche, maybe Zen cliche number 2 or number 3. Certainly no higher than number 5. Is you see this beautiful sunset and you're in the moment. And then you realise you're in the moment and oh, it's gone. You're back in your alienated conceptual being. Forget it. You've lost it. And I want to say no, that's just plain wrong. Yeah, when we're starting out with practice, of course, we kind of come and go like that. And it's actually that, it's actually how that works that is the subject of tonight's talk. So let's get stuck in. Okay, so just be the moment and be nothing but the moment. No concept, no thinking. How does that work? And isn't even that suggestion, that assertion, rather dualistic in itself? There's a right and there's a wrong, there's an either or. And this idea of simply being the moment. What on earth do we mean by that? Look, let's take this really simply. Is it a sunset or is it a sunrise? Superficially, they might look quite the same. And in fact, I could show you the same photo or the same painting labelled sunset or sunrise. And we'd respond to it differently because sunset isn't sunrise. The closing of the day, the heaviness of my body, the sense of a day well done or a day lost or a day of disaster is completely different from the sense of openingness, of possibility, of what's going to happen today at sunrise, or maybe just, oh, thank heavens the night's ended, didn't sleep a wink. It's different. It's absolutely different. It's to do with us. And it's not directly conceptual, it's not directly thinking in that kind of heavy sense. But to say that it has nothing to do with the wider field of our experience and our thinking in that sense is ridiculous. So let's take two Japanese practices, very, very widely popular practices traditionally. So anyway, moon viewing. Going outside just literally to stare at the moon. This particular moon, this particular never again moon, under just this conditions. Seen through trees, seen over water. Seen at just that degree of fullness. Or even more. Let's take that cherry blossom viewing. Traditionally, millions and millions of Japanese will go out to view the cherries. You have effectively forests, parks planted just for this moment when the cherries come into blossom. There's a lovely one in New York, actually. But Japan, just this moment, without that sense of rarity, without that sense of no, here, now, exactly now. It's just pretty trees. And of course, even to say they're trees, we're immediately in a relationship which is about our bodies, about sizes, about what we think of as trees, about resting under trees. So let's just go back to this idea of sunsets for a moment. The idea of sunset and this basic progression of the sun across the sky, even when we know it's not doing that, that embodied experience. This sunset, whether I'm seeing it directly or as a photograph or a painting or just reading about a sunset in a book, it takes its place alongside every other sunset I've ever seen as part of the experience of sunsets. And to that extent, it becomes connected to the past, becomes connected to the future anticipation. We say not separate, and it's an idea of that I keep coming back to in different ways over and again, which is that this moment is not separate. It's not just me being, there's a moment out there and I'm trying to be not separate from it. No, this moment is not separate from any other moment in exactly that sense. This moment connects with the past, it connects with the future. It connects, this sunset connects with every sunset I've ever seen or ever will see. And in fact, we know that the future can redefine the past, it can reframe the past. The experience of remembering this sunset, well, that could be different. That was the sunset I was watching before what I didn't know was going to happen happened. It's It's one thing before, it's another thing afterwards. So let's think about thinking about sunsets. When we give something a name, are we opening to it or are we closing away from it? So let's think about bird watching, twitching, and let's think about looking at moss. Probably I might be doing both of these things, bird watching, but maybe I'm doing one more than the other. So again, I'm drawing them out to show you, suggest a difference. Am I chasing down, reading on the web where I might find this bird of passage, this incredibly rare visitor that's arrived in this country? Haven't seen it. Very few people have seen it. And I've got 17 of the 20th rarest birds in Britain ticked off on my list. This will make 18. This will be brilliant. Now for me that's closure, that's reducing the possible experience of that unique bird to a tick. Part of me, I'm appropriating it for my purposes. Okay, so we say yes. As soon as you say this is a, I don't know, golden oriole or something, you've lost it. You've lost that experience. Yes. Well, actually, no, because. I was going to say yes, but actually let's say no, because. The point of taxonomy, arranging things in relationships, listing features, is actually to show us, not to close, but to open. In one sense, it's a different bird I see as a simple recognition or as just a small brown job, or experiencing and knowing the particularity, the particular features, the engagement with its habitat, the song, the way plumage gradates, or that shows me that this is a juvenile or a juvenile in its second year, or that shows me that it's a male coming into breeding condition, or whatever. That kind of knowledge shows me what was there all the time, but I did not see. I overlooked. Why? Because it didn't matter. Because I didn't know that it mattered. It was irrelevant. Now, of course, I can go through, and a bit like when I'm learning to sit, I can go through with my handbook and list the 10 important features of this bird in this condition. And okay, that's very conceptual, very thinking. But again, I keep doing that. Sounds like I'm the world's maddest twitcher. I'm not. But I do like birds a lot. As I become more familiar, engage with the habitat, see more, it becomes a part of me in the same way that this isn't the first sunset I've seen. It's not even the 1,000th sunset I've seen. Sunsets are a part of me. I have my memories, my sets of experience, and none of that is irrelevant in some kind of, just be this moment. Yes, open onto the particularity of this experience. But this experience is not separate from all your other experiences which connect to it. And so, the moss nerd, looking at the tiny differences that will identify this species or that species. because it actually forces you to look and see and experience and relate. And I can be like a Victorian egg collector and we can send whole species extinct because we're possessing and collecting. Or I can just allow my experience to become richer and respond, not disconnected from that experience at all, better connected into that experience. Openness and possibility. That's actually from the 6th precept. Approaching experience with openness and possibility. Am I closing down my experience? Am I opening it up to something richer, more genuine connection between me and the world? And we open by seeing what's possible, by seeing what's there to be seen, by hearing, listening to what's there to be heard. We've been talking about Canon, the bodhisattva of caring. What are Canon's 2 core activities? Listening, seeing the cries of the world, the suffering of the world, and responding. Are we going to see what's there, playing in front of us the whole time, but we normally miss? We do that, and we can only do that by approaching with openness and possibility. This connection, this relationship as an opening into possibility rather than a drawing back and a closure. And thought will enable us to do either, not separate. So in our caring, in our bearing witness, in all of our responses, they begin in seeing, hearing, actually let's say feeling too, in all its richness. Feeling the emotion that this person, this event brings up in me. Or feeling exactly how this emotion manifests in my body, in my muscles, in my posture. Feeling myself, feeling my emotion, feeling my body as the world. Whether that's my suffering, or what I'm calling my suffering, or whether I'm responding like an unplucked guitar string responds to the string next to it when you do pluck it. Sympathetic vibration, or we call it empathy in terms of emotion. This is important stuff. There's a phrase I really like, not from a Zen teacher, but from French feminist philosopher Sandra Logier. She talks about losing our concepts as almost the beginning of caring, the beginning of seeing what's important, what's meaningful, allowing our attention to be captured, realizing that this is meaningful to us, that I care about this. So we lose our fixed ideas, we lose our fixed concepts, and we allow ourselves to enter into relationship with the experience, whether that's a person, a sunset, whatever. So we're not trying to be objective, don't have some idea of suppressing self. Oh, I'm supposed to disappear, I'm supposed to be a no self, just this moment, that's all I am. Well, no, I'm this being, this body in this moment, and without this being, this body, there is no this moment. But that it's in this noticing, in this seeing, listening, hearing, feeling, noticing what matters, noticing its importance, And as Dogen says, the 10,000 things offering themselves to us and recognizing what's important, receiving the gift. And this interesting question, what offers itself to me? And then what can I offer myself too in return? Again, as care, this mutuality, this not separate. And it begins in experience. And we can go a little bit sciencey and call it perception. Or we can just stick with experience. We've mentioned a little bit about art, a little bit about literature. There's, again, Sandra Logier put me in some other things, and it's always the connections which are interesting. This is Henry James, the novelist. We may have read his books, we may not, may have seen the movies, maybe not. He's talking about literature, about art, but this seems to me to hit the nail of what we're talking about. Really, universally, relations stop nowhere. And the exquisite problem of the artist is eternally but to draw, by a geometry of their own, the circle within which they shall happily appear to do so. This is our actual making sense of the world, our actual what matters. How do things connect up out of this infinity of non-separation? There's me, there's you, there's the world as I perceive it. Or again, experience is never limited. We can't separate out just this experience. Experience is never limited and it's never complete. It is an immense sensibility, a kind of huge spider web of the finest silken threads suspended in the chamber of consciousness and catching every airborne particle in its tissue. Or again, deep experience is never peaceful. Maybe one more. The power to guess the unseen from the seen, to trace the implication of things, to judge the whole piece by the pattern, the condition of feeling life in general, so completely that you're well on your way to knowing any particular corner of it. This cluster of gifts may almost be said to constitute experience. To take what there is and use it without waiting forever in vain for the preconceived, opening to what is, not closing to this fixed idea of conceptual thought. To take what there is and use it without waiting forever in vain for the preconceived, to dig deep into the actual and get something out of that. This doubtless is the right way to live. Bernie Glassman, we make the meal with what we have in front of us. Joko Beck, we start from the experience of this moment, directly as it manifests as us. Beautiful. Beautiful Henry James then. So this experiencing in its fullest sense, this gift of noticing whether it's beautiful or ugliness or my loved one or whatever grabs us, whatever is meaningful, whatever holds our attention and we find important. This is the beginning of care. And if we take care to mean just the action, just the caring in this sense, then we've lost its fullness, we've lost its connection. We've forgotten that Canon, her activity begins in seeing, hearing, noticing what matters, our suffering, and then responding to it. And when we do so, we receive that gift, the world as gift. And then we can give.